Sunrise spills golden light over Blackwood Hollow, a sleepy southern town where old money and new ambition collide. Dr. Marcus Reed, a distinguished black judge, watches from his porch as mist clings to the rolling acres of farmland he inherited from his grandfather. He takes a sip of black coffee, savoring the silence, the scent of damp earth, the rhythmic clucking of hens in the distance. This land is his sanctuary, a stark contrast to the courtroom battles he wages during the week. A wooden sign at the entrance reads, "Reed Family Farm, established 1879. It's not just land. It's history, blood, sweat, perseverance. But not everyone sees it that way. Beyond the farm's fence line, just past the rustling oak trees, lies the edge of Maple Grove Estates, a pristine, HOA-controlled subdivision where every lawn is manicured, every car is a Tesla, and every rule is enforced with iron-fisted pettiness. The residents, mostly white upper-middle-class transplants, like to pretend the farm isn't there. Like Marcus is an unwelcome relic of the past. And no one embodies that more than Karen Whitaker. She moved in last year, immediately assuming the self-appointed role of neighborhood enforcer. Tall, platinum blonde, and perpetually outraged, she wields the HOA handbook like scripture. She calls it preserving the neighborhood's aesthetic. Marcus calls it thinly veiled racism. The first complaint was about the unsightly farm equipment, then the odor of livestock, then the rooster crowing at an inappropriate hour, always delivered with a saccharine smile and a veiled threat. Marcus never engaged, never stooped. He knew her type. But today, something is different. A silver SUV creeps down the dirt path leading to his property, a path that isn't public. The car stops. Karen steps out, nose wrinkled like she's inhaling something foul. Marcus exhales slowly, setting his coffee down. Not today. Karen marches toward the gate in crisp white slacks and a navy blazer. She's dressed like she's heading to a corporate board meeting, not trespassing on a farm. "Good morning, Mr. Reed," she calls, her voice sugared but tight. It's always Mr. Reed. Never Judge Reed. Never Marcus. A deliberate slight. "Morning," he says evenly, stepping off the porch. "I'm sure you're unaware," she begins, "but several neighbors have raised concerns about," she gestures vaguely, as if the entire farm offends her, this situation. Marcus folds his arms. "And what situation is that?" Karen purses her lips. "Your livestock. It's disruptive." A breeze rustles the trees. The distant moo of a cow punctuates the silence. Marcus smiles. "Disruptive to who?" Karen tuts. "Look, I understand this used to be a farm, but Maple Grove has standards. We have rules. This sort of operation is not in alignment with our community values." Marcus chuckles, slow and deliberate. "Our community?" Karen's eyes flash. She straightens. "I'm just saying, change is inevitable. You might consider selling. Before things get difficult." And there it is. The threat. Marcus stares at her, unreadable. He sees the game she's playing. What she doesn't know. She's playing against a judge. He takes a step forward, voice low and steady. "Karen, leave my property." Her lips press into a thin line. She lingers, just long enough to assert her control, before spinning on her heel and striding back to her SUV. Marcus watches as the vehicle disappears down the road. His gut tightens. She's not done. Not by a long shot. The first sign that something is wrong comes early the next morning. Marcus wakes before dawn, as always. He moves through his usual routine, feeding the chickens, checking on the cows, walking the perimeter of the property. But as he approaches the main gate, he stops short. A bright orange notice is zip-tied to the fence. Violation notice. Unauthorized agricultural activity. Marcus frowns, ripping it down. His name isn't even on it, just a generic warning with the Maple Grove HOA letterhead. Except his land isn't part of Maple Grove. It never has been. The farm predates the subdivision by more than a century. His jaw tightens. "Karen." He heads inside, drops the notice on the kitchen counter, and pours himself a fresh cup of coffee. He's seen these tactics before. Petty harassment. Bureaucratic intimidation. Paperwork designed to exhaust him into compliance. But Marcus Reed doesn't intimidate easily. Still, something gnaws at him. This isn't just another empty complaint. This feels calculated. By mid-morning, the disturbances escalate. First, a utility worker shows up unannounced, claiming they received an anonymous report about code violations regarding the farm's fencing. When Marcus asks for details, the man shrugs. Orders from the HOA. Marcus folds his arms. My property isn't under HOA jurisdiction. The worker hesitates, then mutters, "Yeah, that's what I thought," and leaves. A few hours later, a white SUV slows to a crawl outside his fence. Marcus spots Karen in the passenger seat, peering out with a critical eye while a man, her husband, drives. The car lingers long enough to feel invasive before rolling away. Then, the noise complaints begin. An official-looking email lands in his inbox. Subject: excessive noise complaint. It claims multiple residents have complained about aggressive animal sounds and nuisance odors. Marcus exhales sharply, fingers tightening around his phone. He steps onto the porch, surveying his land. Nothing has changed. The farm operates as it always has. The animals, the sounds, the smells, they were here before Maple Grove. His gut tells him this isn't just Karen being her usual nosy, entitled self. This is something else. That evening, Marcus takes a walk down the dirt road, leading toward the edge of Maple Grove. He doesn't cross into the neighborhood. He doesn't need to. From a distance, he watches as Karen and a few other HOA board members gather on her porch. Wine glasses in hand. Animated discussion. Their eyes keep flicking toward his land. A deep, familiar anger simmers beneath his skin. He's seen this before. Wealthy white neighbors deciding that a black-owned property is suddenly an inconvenience. Using laws, codes, and bureaucracy as weapons. They want him gone. But they have no idea who they're dealing with. 2 days later, Marcus is in his truck, pulling back onto his property after a morning at the courthouse, when he spots them. 3 men in hard hats and reflective vests standing at his fence line, measuring tape stretched between them. Utility workers. Again, Marcus pulls up, killing the engine. He steps out slowly, his presence immediately drawing their attention. One of the men, tall, broad-shouldered, clipboard in hand, adjusts his hard hat and clears his throat. "Sir, we're here for an inspection." Marcus folds his arms. "On whose authority?" The man hesitates. "We received a report that this fence encroaches on HOA property. We're here to verify boundary compliance." Marcus exhales through his nose. There it is. He steps forward, his voice calm but firm. This fence was built over 50 years ago, long before Maple Grove was even a blueprint. The property lines haven't changed. The worker glances at his clipboard, shifting uncomfortably. He knows. He knows this is a sham, another Karen-orchestrated stunt. "Look, I'm just doing my job," the man mutters. Marcus tilts his head. "Right. And I'm telling you, your job just ended. You don't have jurisdiction here." For a moment, the workers hesitate. Then, without another word, they pack up their gear and leave. But the fight is far from over. Karen doubles down. That evening, Marcus finds another violation notice zip-tied to his fence. A second noise complaint. Then, a letter in the mail. Formal notice of code review pending legal action. The wording is slick, meant to intimidate. It states that continued noncompliance could result in further action, up to and including property reassessment. Marcus leans against his porch railing, reading the letter again. It's pure bluff, but it confirms what he already knows. Karen isn't just trying to harass him. She's trying to take his land. And that's when he decides it's time to push back. Gathering the evidence. Marcus spends the next few hours digging through public records. He finds exactly what he expects. His farm was legally established in 1879, its borders confirmed through multiple surveys. It was never incorporated into Maple Grove's jurisdiction. But the real smoking gun, the HOA's charter. Buried in the fine print is a clause that explicitly states, the HOA has no authority over properties outside the designated subdivision. And yet, Karen has been issuing notices as if she owns the whole town, bringing in reinforcements. Marcus knows a fight like this needs witnesses. Allies. He calls up an old friend, Ava Hernandez, an investigative journalist. Ava's been covering issues of racial bias and corruption in real estate for years. When Marcus lays out what's happening, she's immediately interested. An HOA targeting a black-owned farm for compliance issues? Ava says over the phone, "That's not just harassment, Marcus. That's a land grab." She promises to start digging into Karen and her HOA cronies. But Marcus isn't done. He reaches out to a few longtime residents, Black and Latino homeowners who've also had run-ins with the HOA. Their stories are eerily similar. Unjust citations, mysterious property devaluations, pressure to sell. This is what they do, an older black woman named Miss Evelyn tells him. They don't want us here, Marcus. He already knew that. But now, Now he has proof. A blatant attack. The next morning, things escalate again. Marcus wakes up to police lights flashing outside his gate. 2 patrol cars. 3 officers. And Karen, standing at the entrance with her arms crossed, looking smug. Marcus steps outside, calm but alert. An officer, white mid-40s, a badge that reads Sergeant Owens, approaches him. "Mr. Reed, we received a call about trespassing and illegal livestock." Marcus blinks. "Trespassing? On my own land." Karen clears her throat, stepping forward with the faux sweetness of a practiced liar. "Officer, we have multiple complaints from concerned residents. Mr. Reed's operations are disruptive to the community, and we're not even sure if he has the proper zoning permits." Marcus watches her carefully. She's confident this time. She thinks she has him cornered. Sergeant Owens turns back to Marcus, flipping through a small notepad. "Sir, do you have documentation proving your ownership and zoning rights?" Marcus doesn't blink. Of course, but he doesn't go inside to fetch them. Not yet, because this is exactly what Karen wants. She wants him to scramble, to feel vulnerable, to react. Instead, he folds his arms and says, "Officer, before I do that, I need you to clarify something for me." Owens frowns. "What's that?" Marcus tilts his head slightly. "What law exactly am I accused of breaking?" Owens hesitates. Karen stiffens. She wasn't expecting resistance. She was expecting compliance. That's when Marcus delivers the first strike. "I'd also like to remind you, Sergeant," he says smoothly, "that I happen to be Judge Marcus Reed of the Blackwood County Superior Court." The shift is immediate. Owens' posture changes. His eyes flicker with recognition. The other officers exchange glances. And Karen, her face drains of color. But this isn't over. Not yet. Because Marcus isn't just going to clear his name. He's going to end this fight, publicly. For a moment, the air is thick with tension. The flashing blue and red lights reflect off the steel farm gate, casting long, distorted shadows across the dirt road. Karen is the first to recover. She clears her throat and straightens her blazer, masking her shock with a tight, rehearsed smile. "Well," she says, turning to Sergeant Owens, "I'm sure Judge Reed understands that no one is above community regulations. It's not personal, just about ensuring a certain standard for the neighborhood." Marcus watches her, amused. She's trying to regain control, pretending this isn't exactly what it looks like. A desperate attempt to push a black landowner off property his family has held for generations. Owens shifts uncomfortably. Judge Reed, I still need to see documentation regarding your property lines and zoning status." His voice is more careful now, measured. Marcus gives a slow nod. "Of course, Sergeant." He turns, walks back inside his house, and returns a moment later, not with a handful of papers, but with a full legal binder. Karen's confident smirk flickers. Marcus flips open the binder. "Here's my deed, issued in 1879. It's been updated, verified, and remains untouched by Maple Grove's jurisdiction." He flips another page. "Here's the county zoning permit for agricultural land, unrestricted. And here," he pauses for effect, tapping the final document with a single, deliberate finger, "is Maple Grove's own HOA charter, explicitly stating it has no authority beyond its designated borders." Silence. Owens scans the documents, his eyes darting between pages. One of the other officers leans in, reading over his shoulder. Karen, still standing stiffly by the gate, crosses her arms. "That doesn't change the fact that your farm is disruptive." Marcus lets out a short, humorless chuckle. "Karen, do you even hear yourself?" He shakes his head. "You bought a house next to a farm, and now you're upset there's a farm next to your house." Karen's face reddens. "It's not just me, Marcus. Other homeowners have complained. Then they can take it up with the county," Marcus says smoothly. "Because legally, Maple Grove has no claim here. Which means every violation notice, every official complaint you've sent me, that's harassment." Owens exhales, rubbing the back of his neck. "Ms. Whitaker, did you issue these notices personally?" Karen stiffens. The HOA board agreed that." Owens cuts her off, flipping through the paperwork. "Because if you've been enforcing non-existent regulations, that could be considered filing fraudulent legal documents." Karen's eyes widen. She steps forward, her voice taking on a shrill edge. "This is ridiculous. He's manipulating the situation. He's just trying to make this about race." Marcus chuckles, shaking his head. "I don't have to make it about race, Karen. You did that when you decided that my farm, my presence, was a problem that needed to be erased. Karen whirls on Owens. Are you just going to let him get away with this? Owens sighs. Ms. Whitaker, unless you have actual legal standing over this property, there's nothing I can enforce here. Karen's mouth opens, then closes. Her desperation is showing now. But the HOA. The HOA, Marcus says, stepping forward, has officially overstepped its authority. And I'm not just going to let this slide. Karen's face goes pale. What does that mean? Marcus tilts his head. It means I'm filing a formal complaint with the county attorney for harassment and unlawful attempts to interfere with private property. He smiles. Oh, and my friend Ava? The journalist? She's running a full story on this. Karen's entire body goes rigid. You wouldn't. I would. Marcus's voice is cool, steady, unshakable. One of the officers leans toward Owens, murmuring, You know, if the judge takes this to court, the HOA could be in serious legal trouble. Karen hears it. She whips back to Marcus, her eyes blazing. You can't do this. Marcus raises an eyebrow. Karen, you did this. For the first time, true fear flickers across her face. She thought she had power, thought she could bully and manipulate, but she was never in control. And now, she's about to face the consequences. Karen is still standing there, mouth open, struggling to process what's happening. This wasn't supposed to go like this. She thought she had him. Thought she could bury him in citations, complaints, and legal red tape until he gave up. But now it's all unraveling. Sergeant Owens clears his throat. Judge Reed, would you be willing to formally submit these documents to the county office for review? Marcus nods. Already done. And I'll be making an official request for an audit of Maple Grove's HOA board. His voice is casual, but Karen flinches like he just fired a gun in the air. And an audit, she stammers. Marcus gives her a slow, knowing look. Yes, Karen, an audit. Considering how you've been throwing around fraudulent violations, I wonder what else you and your little HOA have been up to. One of the other officers shifts on his feet. Actually, sir, there have been several complaints about selective enforcement from this HOA. He looks at Owens. You remember the case last year? That Latino family with the illegal garden? Owens nods grimly. And the black homeowner who kept getting cited for improper lawn maintenance, while his white neighbors had worse yards. Karen's face blanches. That's just a coincidence. Marcus gives her a hard, cold stare. No, it's a pattern. The nail in the coffin. Karen still thinks she can claw her way out of this. She squares her shoulders, trying to sound authoritative. Listen, I was just doing what's best for the community. If people feel unfairly targeted, that's unfortunate, but Maple Grove has rules. She's cut off by the distant roar of an approaching car. A sleek black SUV barrels down the road, coming to a hard stop just outside the farm's entrance. The door swings open, and out steps Ava Hernandez. The investigative journalist strides toward them, phone in hand, camera already rolling. Karen Whitaker, Ava says brightly. Care to comment on the accusations that Maple Grove's HOA has been systematically targeting black and Latino homeowners? Karen physically recoils. What? Ava doesn't stop. She holds up her phone. We've already uncovered internal HOA emails discussing problematic homeowners. Strangely, they all happen to be people of color. Want to explain that? Karen stares at her, then whips toward Marcus. You set me up. Marcus just shrugs. No, Karen. You set yourself up. Ava turns to Owens. Sergeant, do you know that the HOA has been filing fraudulent citations against homeowners? Because I have the emails to prove it. Owens stiffens. The officers exchange looks. Karen panics. You can't, this isn't. And then the final blow. Marcus pulls out one last document. He unfolds it carefully, like a slow, deliberate ritual. It's a class action lawsuit. Filed. Stamped. Ready to go. Karen's breathing turns shallow. She stares at it like it's a bomb. This, Marcus says, his voice smooth and calm, is a formal lawsuit against the Maple Grove HOA for harassment, racial discrimination, and unlawful interference with private property. Karen staggers back. No. No. Marcus's eyes gleam. Yes. The collapse. Karen is sweating now. Her mind is racing. She needs to find a way out, a way to shift blame. I wasn't acting alone, she blurts, turning to Owens. The entire HOA board voted on those complaints. I was just following procedure. Marcus smirks. Oh, don't worry. They'll all be getting their own legal notices. Owens nods, looking tired. Ms. Whitaker, I think you should come with us for further questioning. Karen sputters. Wait, what? You can't just. We can and we will, Owens says. Fraudulent citations. Abuse of power. Racial discrimination. You may want to call a lawyer. Karen sags. Her face is pale, her body trembling. She has lost. Marcus watches as the officers guide her toward the squad car. Just before they put her in, she jerks her head up, glaring. You think you've won, she hisses at Marcus. You think you can just stay here. But people like you. Her voice chokes off as Marcus takes a step closer, towering over her. His voice is low, firm, undeniable. People like me? He raises an eyebrow. Karen, let me make something very clear to you. He leans in slightly, letting his next words land like a hammer. This land isn't going anywhere. And neither am I. Karen deflates. The last of her fight dies in her eyes. The officers shut the car door. And just like that, she's gone. The news spreads like wildfire. By the next morning, every major outlet in the county is running the story. Local HOA president accused of racial discrimination. Fraudulent violations? Maple Grove HOA under investigation. Judge takes on HOA corruption and wins. Ava turns to Owens. Sergeant, do you know that the HOA has been filing fraudulent citations against homeowners? Because I have the emails to prove it. Owens stiffens. The officers exchange looks. Karen panics. You can't, this isn't. And then the final blow. Marcus pulls out one last document. He unfolds it carefully, like a slow, deliberate ritual. It's a class action lawsuit. Filed. Stamped. Ready to go. Karen's breathing turns shallow. She stares at it like it's a bomb. This, Marcus says, his voice smooth and calm, is a formal lawsuit against the Maple Grove HOA for harassment, racial discrimination, and unlawful interference with private property. Karen staggers back. No. No. Marcus's eyes gleam. Yes. The collapse. Karen is sweating now. Her mind is racing. She needs to find a way out, a way to shift blame. I wasn't acting alone, she blurts, turning to Owens. The entire HOA board voted on those complaints. I was just following procedure. Marcus smirks. Oh, don't worry. They'll all be getting their own legal notices. Owens nods, looking tired. Ms. Whitaker, I think you should come with us for further questioning. Karen sputters. Wait, what? You can't just. We can and we will, Owens says. Fraudulent citations. Abuse of power. Racial discrimination. You may want to call a lawyer. Karen sags. Her face is pale, her body trembling. She has lost. Marcus watches as the officers guide her toward the squad car. Just before they put her in, she jerks her head up, glaring. You think you've won, she hisses at Marcus. You think you can just stay here. But people like you. Her voice chokes off as Marcus takes a step closer, towering over her. His voice is low, firm, undeniable. People like me? He raises an eyebrow. Karen, let me make something very clear to you. He leans in slightly, letting his next words land like a hammer. This land isn't going anywhere. And neither am I. Karen deflates. The last of her fight dies in her eyes. The officers shut the car door. And just like that, she's gone. The news spreads like wildfire. By the next morning, every major outlet in the county is running the story. Local HOA president accused of racial discrimination. Fraudulent violations? Maple Grove HOA under investigation. Judge takes on HOA corruption and wins.